back to week 3, and I'm here with Erica again. And the subject for today is 3P smugness. And just to put that into context, when we were batting about ideas for what we were going to talk about on these 4 cornerstones, this was the one I named, I think, because of a conversation that Erica and I had. And I'm gonna let you talk to her about it, because it was what she said to me really landed, and so I want you to hear it fresh the way that I heard it. So I'm just going to throw it over to, like, we talked about this concept and I came up with the name for the module, but this is like what she teaches. So Erica, I'm just going to hand over to you to kick off. Like, you know what that title means, right?
Well, I love this title because I am, a lot of who I spend my time with are people who've been learning or teaching the principles, and so I kind of see this everywhere. So I grew up. I grew up learning the principles. Both my parents teach this, and since I was, I don't know, 4, I think they picked it up. And so and I've been teaching people and kind of developing coaches and working with clients for 20 years. And like Nicola, when my clients hear something and they have an insight and they get this, all of a sudden, this feeling of relief that they've never found, and this peace of mind and this spiritual lightness and freshness and calm, even though their life is just a train wreck in some way. Often what's around the corner for those people is, oh my God, everyone needs to hear this right now. And I'm going to go hand it out. And I'm going to start with these people in my house. And I love them and I want them to have this. And it sort of reminds me of when I'm having, like, one of my guilty pleasures is peanut butter and jelly sandwich on like sourdough bread, toasted sourdough. It's just amazing. And, you have something you love and you just insist that everybody has a bite, even if they don't want it and they don't like it. It's just, you really so want them to have the experience that you're having. And so, what happens is there's a sort of trick of the mind that happens when we discover thought. And when we realize, oh, we're thinking this up and it's not even real. And that's where our suffering's coming from. And there's something else that happens for you. And you have to look over here too. It's really sweet, but we get a little bit clumsy. So when people start seeing thought, the first thing that becomes visible is everybody else's blind spots and everybody else's lack of grace and perspective and sensibility when they lose their way, because of the way that thought and consciousness and mind work together. They create, your eyes are pointed out this way. So what you see is the world. You really don't see your own thinking. When you do, you see it, but then when you don't, you see everybody else's, because that's where experience is happening. That's where it's playing out. And that's where all the lighting is. So you see other people's thinking. And, so since everybody lives in their own reality and their own worldview, it also happens that we don't happen to have the same brand of crazy that your partner and your kids do, fortunately. So you'll be able to see their weaknesses and how they get lost in thought. And it'll look just like they don't know what they're doing, and you're definitely more evolved than they are. Because everybody else's habit looks so stupid and looks like thought, and then yours, it doesn't even look like a habit is happening. It frankly looks like it has nothing to do with thought. You're in this other area of a different kind of problem.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I brought to you originally. Was like, well, my husband wants to really tell off my son, but he doesn't realize that if he just calmed down, then things would look different. And so he needs, like, if he could just learn, like, not to take himself so seriously when he's obviously lost in thought, and that if he just stepped away, calmed down, then he could found a nice feeling, then he could go back to my son. Everything in my family would work better. And if my son knew that he was having a separate reality, then basically, if everyone knew what I knew, we wouldn't actually have any problems in my family.
And you want to write a pamphlet and hand it out. with
Yeah,
diagrams and like, let me show you about my insight. Let me tell you, because now I know,
yeah,
and you clearly don't. So
yeah.
there is sort of a sense of hierarchy
Oh,
that,
completely.
that really looks like it's happening. And and coaches, you know, maybe we're more guilty of that because we feel like, well, I mean, I'm the professional here. I really like, I do this all day. I'm
I've
really
got a
more
certificate
qualified.
in principles.
I've logged more hours. People come to me. So you sort of, but also just as a parent, you know, you're seeing your kids kind of stumble around and bump into things, and like, let me help you because I've been through that. So people can get that way. It's really common, and at the same time, you know, your eyes, like I said, are pointed outwards, and so you see their lostness, but not your own, and your weaknesses and lostness and thought in you is invisible because you kind of gotten used to it. So if you know, it feels normal to you and like you're doing fine, um, just like I can't tell when our house is really warm because I just spent 6 hours working in it.
Mm.
And so somebody else comes in and they can feel it, and that's the thing about, you know, you can get kind of a low normal, and so it also looks like, well, you're doing, you know, even though you have anxiety and concern and tension and you're holding that and living in it, it also looks like, well, it's about as well as you can do given what my kid is, you know, dealing with. So you either won't notice it because it's been around, it's like white noise, or it's just a constant overlay. And so, you know, when when you look out at life and you see your kids insecurity and they're, you know, they're really troubled, um, it does look like uh, it your anxiety and sense of burden will feel invisible to you, and like you're stuck in it until your kid's okay, um, or is just frankly eclipsed by how badly your kid's doing. You just don't, yours is the lesser problem, so it kind of can go under the radar, um, how you get caught and what's happening before the fact of your visibility. There's something happening out here and your eyes are looking out this way. So you know what happens, and what Nicola and I talked about. I have to have this conversation with a lot of people who go in and wreck their household with their
You can totally out me. I don't mind on this one.
with their teachings. Is you know, you have to sort of you have to look for their wisdom. You really have to look for it, more than you're looking for their lostness. And even though you're seeing evidence of lostness everywhere and you're really good at tracking it and tracking what they need and what needs to be fixed and where there's cause for alarm, is you really have to, you have to look for how they're, um, what else there is besides their, what they're missing and their weakness, and kind of commit to seeing how they're graceful in areas that you're not, and how to learn from them and their perspective. And
There is a step just before that that you
mhm.
said to me, which was, do you know what, Nick? Sometimes I have to sit and look at myself and ask myself, like, am I up my own ass,
Mhm.
as you say in America? And that's
Right.
what hit me between the eyes. Like, that was the first thing I saw when you point, oh, I'm totally up my own ass. I think that I know how, all humans work. I think I know how people,
Right.
before I could even start to look and see, or maybe my kids have some wisdom and maybe they do some things really well that I don't. It
Mhm.
was like, first of all, there was that recognition of, like, when you said it, I was like, oh, that's exactly what I think. That's exactly what I think.
I've
I
been
think I have
caught.
that
They're on to me.
superiority
Yeah.
thing where I think I know, and I'm totally up my own ass. I
Well, and
totally think I've got this nailed
yeah, because
because I've bumped into the principles.
that's
That's
the
a bit
thing
of a
is
wake
that
up call.
it is, it's kind of a, you know, it's a strange experience because you have this moment of sort of epiphany or realization where all of a sudden you see with a whole new light, and you have this, you just see things so clearly, and it feels like, well, now I know. And
Yeah.
what people don't realize is this is why we talk about, you know, the principles so much with people, and why we keep showing people, because you get that feeling is just illuminating one insight in one moment, one layer that's alive in that moment. And your mind is drumming up a whole new set of blind spots and weaknesses while you're sitting there, as soon as you have your insight. So in a way, you have to, what's hard for parents is rather than look for what you see and what you've seen and the insight that you just had, in a way, you have to get comfortable looking at where you're uptight and complicated compared to your husband or your kids, where you're overthinking things and where you don't have it together in the ways that they do. So I found my kids, one of my kids, he was, I think, in 6, and I was so upset about this kid that was really coming after him, and I was kind of mad at this kid. I was like, this isn't right. And my son wasn't bothered by it at all. He just, he just didn't bother him. He's 6. He would come back to him and say, oh no, we're friends now. I remember him telling me, oh, we're friends now. I said, do you want help with that kid? Like, is he still bothering you? Because I really try and stay out of my kids' business. And he said, oh no, we're friends now. And I said, well, how did that happen? And he said, well, I just asked him one day if he wanted to be my friend, and then he did. And I just realized, oh, yeah, it does work that way. The people that when we are able to go about people gracefully, there's a way in which we're able to let go of what's already happened and look fresh at things and see possibility in people rather than seeing the past. And I so that's part of it is looking for ways in which they're living in a feeling that you're not. And part of that is taking yourself less seriously. And if you had your husband's perspective, you might be more stable around certain things and look for ways in which they're living in a feeling that has more, that has less fear and concern built into it, instead of writing them off of, well, they don't really carry the burden, so of course they feel light because it's not really on them, it's on me. And it's really easy to write that off. So part of it is just being able to let go of your first batch of ideas that the only reason your kid or your husband is calm is because they don't understand what's going on. They don't really have a grasp of what's going on. And to be able to take yourself and your outlook, well, maybe I'm missing the plot. We don't really know that. I think that when you have an insight and you realize something, you think, now I know what I'm talking about for everything moving forward. And that's where I've been guilty of it. And so you have to.
Even when you asked me to look at that, and I could see things like my grumpy son who just wouldn't say a word to anybody.
Right.
And what I noticed is he'd go upstairs and then I'd hear him laughing away with his friends on his phone upstairs.
Right.
Doing it in the other room now. And it's like he wouldn't have spoken to us all day, and then he'd be laughing with his friends upstairs. And I was like, oh my God, in the time it takes him to walk up the stairs, he can drop a bad mood like that.
Yeah,
like,
and that's
awesome. Like, I want to learn about how to do that.
And that's the thing
I
is,
saw the health in that, and like how he had something that I could really do with learning from. And I saw it in every one of my kids, and I saw it in my husband. The minute I learned.
And I think that's the thing is you do have to get interested in what else there is besides your amazingness and what you just saw and your answers so far, and look for where you're seeing concern about a kid. You have to look and say, well, what is there besides their concern, besides my concern? What other qualities do they have? If I have insight and I have answers and I have peace of mind that just came to me, maybe they have it. And if you don't look, you miss it, even though they're surrounding you. So I can't, one of the things that, you want to look at your insights as just an example, one example so far of evidence that there's a fresh way of looking at life, and forget about the insight you had and forget about what you think, is you want to be looking for what else there is besides your take on something. So your, you know, your husband, your kids can teach you something, and you really have to commit to seeing their strengths and how they're okay. And you know, there's two ways of seeing that I talk to parents about a lot. Is you want, one of the things that I think I talked about this in an earlier segment, is their acting out is often a reason that we live in a state of concern. And one of the things people don't realize is acting out is a way of stabilizing. So it's not pretty, and maybe there's better ways, but they're just, teenagers especially, are just learning how to handle emotion in these giant amounts. And so, you know, they get really dark, they get really depressed, they get really nasty and rude, and they're mean to you. But it does stabilize them. And you want to be able to look at that part of things. Well, it is part of a system that they're learning to adapt. This is the best they can do so far, and it works. And one of the things you have to be able to see is, well, they blow up at me, but then they're fine with their friends. And what I always hear is, how come they're not as nice to me as they are to people they don't know, or, you know, people that they just met last year? How come I get all the bad stuff? And I have to show them, well, your kid is preserving their reputation. You'll forgive them and their friends won't. And they have to, they are thinking about things in a way that's much more thoughtful and deliberate, and they are being guided out of the weeds to a more stable place. And that's what you want to be looking for in a,
the thing is
kid.
that we make up in our heads, and I hear it again and again and again. I just had an email from someone just before I jumped on here with you, like, you know, my kid is struggling, like, how do I help them? What do I need to do? Do you work with children? Do you teach them the principles? And we have it set up in our minds that if someone hasn't done a course on the principles, or read a book on the principles, or watched a video or heard a podcast on the principles, then there's no way that the principles are in operation for them.
Right.
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 And we don't even realize that that's what we think.
They haven't been handed the pamphlet.
Nobody's taught them it. So how can
Right.
they make the most of their understanding of the principles if they don't know the principles? And it's one of those invisible assumptions that we operate under, that we don't realize that that's what we think until we hear ourselves say it.
Right. Versus the you know, the
versus
principles.
Me, I've been on a course. I've been on lots of courses. So
I have something installed that they don't. See, that's the thing is you know, the principles are really just a way of explaining the science behind the guidance and insight and realizations that we've had so far in life before we got to the principles. It's really just a way of talking about it, a language, and a way of pointing it out that's a little bit more direct. So if you explain, you know, gravity to somebody, they understand, you know, they start realizing, oh yeah, everything falls. It's already been in their experience, and the same is true if you explain moods to people, or the fact that thought clusters, it moves around because it's energy, and then you see patterns, and you point it out, people see, oh yeah, I have moods. They've been happening all along, but it does. There's a way in which it helps people understand, oh, there's a predictability and a rhythm to it, and it goes down, but it comes back up and brings us peace of mind. So there's less fear in your life and insecurity, and it doesn't feel so haphazard. That's all it is. It's not. So oftentimes what you have to look for, and I have to show people, is your husband, your wife, your kid, I don't care how old they are, even your really low functioning in-law that doesn't get along with anybody and is dissatisfied. There's things that they understand about life and see in a way that makes them more graceful than you. And you want to get interested, and there's people have discovered, have an understanding of thought. Everybody has it in their own way, and you want to be able to forget about what you've seen so far and what you've made up about yourself, that you know more, and be looking for, well, what do other people get that I don't get? So one of the other things Nicole and I talked about is sometimes people will see, like, if you don't mind me sharing this, that you saw your husband is, he was kind of had an intolerance to your son, and he'd get mad at him. You had mentioned it in another one of these other segments. And you thought, well, no, he's got to come at him with a good feeling. Well, I don't know. Life isn't endlessly tolerant, and drawing lines and boundaries are in service to getting your kids in shape for the social world, so they're prepared and understand people have limits. And it's,
what he saw, what was so cool that I saw in him, and I love it that you picked that example because I think it's such a good example, is that he treats my son like he's not fragile. Right. Like, he can totally handle a good telling off. I don't. I realize, oh my goodness, you have no thinking about getting annoyed. You have no thinking about telling somebody what you think.
Right.
You have no concept that he's not going to bounce back after this.
Right.
Right. You don't think you're going to break him by shouting him or telling him off. And I think at some level I do. So I'm always the peacemaker, because I don't like the conflict, because I don't like sitting in the uncomfortable feeling of conflict. My husband doesn't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah, and that's
How
one of
cool
the things.
I'm like, I want to learn more about that from him.
And that's one of the things people see. One of the conclusions, trends that I see just in the 44 years I've been watching people learn the principles, is people get very phobic of negativity, because they have this realization, oh my God, I tend to see better answers as I calm down. There is something to be learned there, but it's not a fourth principle. Sometimes it's helpful for your kid to see, oh, mom has limits, dad has limits, the world has limits. And for them to understand thought is working in people and works in certain ways. And it's not that you should go out and be less tolerant of your kids or be negative, but you have to be able to look at things fresh and say, well, am I bringing my own fear into the situation, disguised as wisdom, and of what I've realized about the principles? So if you're afraid of your kid breaking,
disguised as because I'm more spiritual than you are.
Yeah, definitely. And right. And you definitely are more evolved, and you just tolerate it in him. So you want to be able to, my point is you want to be able to look at life fresh, and look at your husband fresh. So if you have a chip on your shoulder that you're higher up on the hierarchy than your husband, that's something you want to really look at, maybe in certain areas, but maybe not. And whereas, and trust him, you figure, well, if your son was 3 years old or had Asperger's, I'm certain that your husband, who I've never met, would handle him differently. So if he's being intolerant, maybe that's normal, and maybe you're off base. So you want to be able to. So some of the things that you want to be able to look at, generally speaking, coming away from this, is that your spouse and your kids have clarity and leadership. Your spouse has an outlook on parenting that you don't, and it can be disguised as less evolved. It can look like a lesser approach and a lesser model, and that's, you want to look for that. Anytime you feel like they're out to lunch, or they're weak, or they're fragile in your kids, that's where you want to get interested, is what am I missing? And you that's, if you learn nothing else from the principles, be able to look at anytime you point that finger outside of yourself, you're in a bad feeling, and you're feeling very judgy and better than and arrogant, and there's sort of a separation, and you're not in the soup together. That's where you want to be looking inside yourself. And a few ways that it's looked, I'll speak for myself, is I'm looking for me, and I have to get over myself, and that now that I've had insight and realization, which I sort of started having when I was 13, 14, I started seeing, oh my God, other people are missing, things that I'm seeing. What happened is I had a realization for that moment, but as a 13-year-old, I didn't really think I knew anything. My learning curve was really sharp. I had sort of what I recommend to my clients, and I have to keep coming back to now is, yeah, we've had insight, but you want to keep coming back to your own humility. And I think I know what's happening, which is exactly how we felt before we had our first insight. And that maybe my arrogance and I know better, let me teach them, is telling you to shut up and listen and see what else there is besides what you've learned, no matter how amazing your insight is and how many people you've helped. And so part of it is a humility, and part of it is just an openness. And instead of how they're lost and crazy, how are they calm and composed where I'm lost and crazy?
It's what's so cool about it. Okay, so this is what I would do before. Is I would go and tuck myself away from my family onto my laptop or my phone and find podcasts about parenting or about the principles, so that I could increase my already very deep and profound knowledge, and hear something new, so that I could get on better with my family and help my kids and teach them better and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And how I notice my experience has shifted since we've had that conversation is that I spend more time with my family and I see more about the principles with them, because they're such amazing teachers. All these capabilities and things they can cope with, and ways they have of seeing life. But I only get to, so I get a double whammy, which is A, I have the best teachers, and B, I'm actually spending time with the people that I've been sitting in my office trying to figure out how to spend more time with.
And how to get closer, how to get a connection to. You go into your lab in the next room, right?
Like go be in with the wildlife, right?
Well,
like
and that's the thing.
And then you just, and then you, it's like win all the way around.
Well, and that's the part, and we can kind of close on that point, is the part of it that I think has, where it's come together, where the principles have come together for me, more than anything else, I think, is that exactly what you're saying, is that in addition to sort of realizing I need to find my humility and my openness when I lose it, but more importantly, and the getting over myself, more importantly, is I'm more interested in the finding my fondness and appreciation for the people in my life. Essentially, I want to love people. That's how I feel about my clients. It's how I feel about people that even, my in-laws or sorry, none of them are listening to this, or people that I've had, that I've gotten lost in my feeling for. I know what I'm looking for, and I know when I haven't gotten there yet. And sometimes it can get disguised as a parent or a loved one as concern, and then you get stuck there. Mm-hmm. And you want to be able to see there's a sort of a continuum there of fondness and appreciation. On the other end is the 3 principles scoring system, your score and their score, and raising your average. As like, those can't, you have to pick one over the other, and in a way, the way that we're talking about it, and ironically, as soon as you find your fondness and appreciation, your score goes up. And it's sort of the way that you're not looking for it is, you'll find all of a sudden everything's fine. You're fine. They're fine. When you find your closeness for them, and you can't take our word for it. You sort of have to find it for yourself, the way Nicola did. But you have to be willing to take a chance and turn your back on learning more, so that you can find that connection and just, shut up and go in there and just love them despite everybody's scores. And you'll find all of a sudden, oh my God, this is what they're talking about. So that's what I would recommend you do. Yeah. Now that you're stuck in your house with all these people, go do that.
Enjoy them.
Exactly.
Brilliant. So if you're stuck in with your kids at the moment, if you're watching this in lockdown, And you have the best 3 principles teachers there are going. You can
Right.
step away from the computer and just,
they're much better than Nicola and I.
yeah, oh yeah,
Right.
completely. Like turn the
Right.
video off right now. Go
Right.
find
And they're free.
Yeah, go find
Yeah.
them right now and watch them for half an hour, and you will
Right.
learn more about the principles than you did in the last 30 minutes.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Erica.